Doctors of Reddit, what is it like when you go to the doctors? I go in with my 1 to 2 complaints, succinctly give them the details that are relevant, answer their questions as able, and take their advice on testing, and follow through with the testing and treatment they advise. If I feel it is off the mark or I wish to have other testing done, I ask about it, and see if it is appropriate. While only I know my normal best, my doctor is an expert. I seek out for guidance and help, and I value their advice and ideas. No doctor should treat themselves by themselves. Everyone should have a primary care provider. They are your primary source of health care. They are who you see for routine checkups. They are who you call it, you have a concern. They are who you should go to for anything non-emergent. They will refer you to specialists if needed. They will coordinate care between all doctor/care providers. Walk-in clinics should almost never be used. They don't know you. They don't practice the best medicine in many cases. Many are for-profit enterprises attached to pharmacies or other similar stores. There are exceptions for clinics in low-resource areas, but in general walk-in clinics are not nearly as good as going to your own doctor. I hate going to the doctors, but that's probably my own issues with regards to control. That is the issue. But whenever I go to the doctors, I really prefer that they not know I'm a physician. I get a clearer explanation, and I find that there are assumptions made if they find out. I work in the operating room, and there is a joke that the most complications happen to doctors' wives and VIPs because you do things outside your normal safe practice to try and accommodate. All I want from a doctor is to be treated like everyone else, because I know that means I'll get their best. It depends. It has its good and bad points. My original family medicine guy took a hands-off approach to management, physical exam and labs. It seems like he simply trusted me to do the right thing, but I kinda felt like we were going through the bare bones motions to get my employee health points. The relationship fell apart when I injured my hand and went to see him. He was like, "It's just a sprain." I sit down, nose ray. I didn't believe him, argued it, and felt a bit dismissed in the end, so I pulled strings and got him ray. The hand was broken, badly. I fired him as my personal physician for that one, because who knows how long he would have kept letting me work with my injury. New doctor is tough on me and actually makes me answer to him regarding my lab results, cholesterol, sugars, ECT. Definitely a no bullshit, no excuses approach, which physician patients are good at giving. I think I would rather have a physician that isn't afraid to treat another physician than a wimpy doc that lets you get away with things, is hands off, and is too trusting. The visits are usually pretty short and self-directed. If I'm worried enough about something to ask for a test or lab, they'll usually order it out of courtesy. When I'm there with a family member or one of my kids, it is often just to bounce ideas off another doc to make sure I'm not over or underreacting. I'm boarded in family medicine and my wife is a physician assistant. I own both my own practice and have a position as an employed physician. I guess you could say I'm technically my own doctor, but that's only true in the sense of the insight I have into my own health and what warrants follow-up. I have been fortunate in that I have never needed a specialist. In all practicality, my actual doctor is my former junior resident from residency. I trust her and bounce anything concerning off of her and take her advice. I have many close friends in medicine, and thus most of my interactions with other doctors is informal but intensely respectful. I always approach colleagues formally and am invited to an informal relationship which I reciprocate. I respect their time, their career, and don't go in with too many expectations. I generally practice with the ethos that less is more, and thus I don't expect unnecessary workups. I'm just fortunate that my access is streamlined. I have not found caring for other physicians is too difficult. What is difficult is caring for their family who can act entitled or are sometimes very much mismanaged by their spouse in terms of care. It's difficult to tell the wife of a surgeon who put her on hydroxychloroquine as an outpatient for a mild cough, and no confirmation of COVID-19 could be the reason she's having new onset palpitations. These are the types of situations I cringe to be involved in. Caring for physicians directly, we tend to do a lot less than the public seeks for itself. We understand the futility of many interventions. We tend to understand that more care isn't always better care. We are however able to quickly process and work up clusters of symptoms that could be serious. As one would expect, our precision in using resources is far better. I'm not a doctor, but I'm a lawyer who has sought the services of other lawyers. I would imagine that, unless the doctor has their exact specialty, they listen to what he says and wouldn't second guess. At least that's what I do with other lawyers. The law is extremely broad, and unless you specialize in a particular area, you probably know next to nothing about it compared to the person you're talking to. I assume medicine is the same way. I'm an optometrist. I avoid mentioning I'm a doctor when I'm at the doctor because I'm pretty low on the totem pole of prestige. Optometry school, while challenging, isn't at the same level as medical school. I enjoy having the title. It just feels like a reach to portray myself as having gone through the same grueling life to get here. However, when it does come up, it's never been a pissing contest or who do you think you are conversation. It's been very pleasant. IDK, some sort of imposter syndrome, I guess. I learned a great lesson about patient care from my optometrist. He told me that patients will always try to tell you what they think is going on, but your job is to ask the history in a way that gets them to say the facts without their conclusions. This was after I told him what I thought was wrong with my eyes instead of telling him what my symptoms were. I'm a pediatrics resident and take care of enough kids of medical folks with various training. They are generally out of their comfort zone with pediatric medicine, but I find it helpful to know their background because I know that they were trained to think in a certain way and that they can follow my thought process. I bring a printout of my medical history and hand it to them to save time. They always say, "Wow, thanks. Okay, what do you want?" "I need a recipe for this amount of insulin for my diabetes." "Do I need a referral to anything?" "Podiatry." "No." Patient refuses podiatry referral. Extensively counseled. Then we shoot the shit. I'm not a doctor, but an occupational therapist. I work closely with a doctor who does tendon repairs and nerve repairs / releases. When I started having symptoms, I shot him an email saying, "Hey, these are my symptoms. These are the provocative tests. Would you be okay being my doctor?" He agreed and got me in as soon as possible. On the Evil, he sent his med student in first. I heard him at the door. I laid out my symptoms and the med student essentially brushed me off and said, "Do you know how rare that would be?" He went outside and gave the report to the doctor, who had been listening, and doc said she's right, that he was awesome, did the tests, listened, etc. When it came to the surgery, he was super cool, walked me through all the details he knew I wanted, and after has been amazing with my recovery. He told me his basic restrictions and the timelines for strengthening etc, and told me he trusts my clinical judgment and to just email him. He said he knew that if I felt that something was wrong to come back. He's been super chill and shoots me an email. I requested extended medical leave and he had no problem. He trusted my judgment. He's rad. Not a doctor, but my dad was. They don't go. Doctors hate to go to the physician. My dad would never go to get checked. We used to live in different cities, and 5 years ago he came for my birthday, November, and I was concerned he had lost so much weight. My dad visited my brother in the US for Christmas, and it was very difficult for me to reach him. He wouldn't pick up the phone or return my text messages. A few days before New Year's Eve, he called me and told me he was sick. He had cancer. My brother went to the airport to pick him up, and dad was in a wheelchair. None of his children knew he was sick. It turned out that he had been feeling bad and even passed out at work, and he didn't want to go to the doctor. One of his employees took him and even threatened to talk to his children if he didn't do it. He said his doctor recommended to go visit my brother because the treatment wasn't available in our country. Government doesn't care or provide medicines and the health system sucks. My brother and sister spent the holidays taking care of him. When he returned, I went to visit him and stayed 2 weeks with him. My brother got him a nurse, and the guys that worked with my dad at my brother's business took care of him while I went back home to my husband and 5 kid. 2 weeks later, my brother called me crying because my dad was dying. I flew back to my dad, got there at night, and he was gone in the morning. Please, doctors, do take care of your health. Your loved ones deserve it. If my dad had gone to get his checkups, he would have found earlier and could have an opportunity to beat cancer. No, not a doctor but a nurse. I'm always reluctant to share that as my specialty is mental health, not medical. I don't want doctors/nurses to assume I know a lot more than I do. I'm also fearful that I will be avoided more during a hospital stay. My husband is in and out of hospitals. Everyone knows that I'm a nurse. It's in the record. It's part of handover because I don't volunteer that info. Now, a few years ago, I was admitted to hospital and back on the ward. Post-surgery, I wanted to go to the loo, but I was hooked up to these IV drips on both sides. I buzzed for a nurse and she said she would bring a pan. I said I don't want a pan. She left to get a pan. On return, I said I want to use the loo. She said that the doctor wrote in the notes that I'm only to use a pan. I said I'm a registered nurse and I would love to see that entry because I have never heard of a doctor caring about how someone opens their bowels. She near shit herself. And I got to use the loo. So maybe there is an advantage to speaking up. I'm straightforward with my doctor and what my problem is. I give them a succinct history without extraneous context and what I think the problem is, and I do generally let them know I'm also a physician. I think having an open and honest dialogue is the way to go about it, as we can have a deeper conversation about what my medical issue may represent, rather than the generalizations we sometimes have to give laypeople who may not otherwise fully understand the pathology of their condition. I generally appreciate providers who cut to the chase. I don't need them to be overly kind or have service-oriented bedside manner. I just need to feel assured that they have thought thoroughly about my problems. This does not necessarily mean I'm expecting them to run a bunch of tests, because I too understand the difference between thoughtful test ordering versus shotgunning. Not a doctor yet, still a medical student, but I always try to make it as easy as possible for the doctor I'm seeing. I have one complaint per appointment and describe it as succinctly as possible. If there is something I'm particularly concerned about, I mention it, but I try not to diagnose myself beforehand because it's impossible to be completely objective. Also, having seen how the healthcare system functions, I don't mind if the doctor I'm seeing is running late. I've had quite a lot of experience as a patient, both before and after becoming a medical student. I'd say the only thing that's really changed is now I'm much more clear when describing symptoms. I'm no doctor, but I work in emergency pre-hospital care. I have a good relationship with my PCP and specialists, so they'll listen to my suspicions, verify my findings, lay out treatment options for me, and not try to convince me one way or the other. It makes things incredibly low stress to have this mutual respect for each other. Sometimes I'll want to have some additional blood work done which may not necessarily be indicated, just because I want to squash a little anxiety gremlin about something that feels off, or I may not want to take a certain medication that's better indicated than an alternative. My GP was my dad's coworker when he worked in the same practice. The first few minutes are about hi, how are you? How are things at home? How's your job? Later, I have to remind him that I actually do have a complaint, so we switch to him asking me what I want, and I mean that literally. I get complete freedom to order my own blood tests, imaging, referrals, just with a different signature. Honestly, I think my GP is glad I've already done the thinking for him. He's a good guy though. Thanks for watching. In comments, write about similar facts and situations from your life. If you enjoy this video, watch other on my channel, and have a nice day.